when we looked at all the information about who's coming here and what they're excited about, we realized that there's a lot of you who are just getting into the space and wanted to understand what could be possible. So to make sense of all of that, we decided to do a really interesting talk. I'm going to invite Vitalik here on stage to tell you about what are the possible ideas that you can think of. Not just yet, there you go. We're going to focus the next 30 minutes on things that you should think about building in the space, where we see there's a lot of progress that could be made, a lot of things that could be made better, and things that are just not getting the attention that we'd like to get. And all of that should help you get some ideas for your hackathon projects and hopefully even other bigger projects that can turn into more than just side projects. So without further ado, please welcome Vitalik on stage.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. So today, I wanted to give talk about some things that I've talked about in various contexts over the last year or so. But basically, the focus is on like what kinds of things really does it make sense to start working on right now, and what kinds of things are actually really accessible to people that are like just getting into the space right now. So the big picture to me is that Ethereum's 2 decades, basically the last 10 years, are solving problems in theory, right? So a lot of discussion around switching from proof of work to proof of stake, a lot of discussion around improving scalability, a lot of discussion around solving privacy problems, around improving security, various other things. But it was still fairly theoretical. The number of people actually using the blockchain is fairly small for most of this period. But then the next decade needs to be much more of a focus on solving very concrete problems that people in the real world have. So there are very many users of Ethereum, crypto, all of these things already today, right? But I think the way that it looks to me is that in many places, very few people have found a use for Ethereum or other blockchains, aside from trading digital monkeys. In many places, very many people have found uses for it, but they're largely using centralized exchanges. Just telling a story, this picture, minus the anonymous masks to protect other people's privacy, is from my trip to Argentina back in 2021. And I remember visiting, and I remember just seeing the really huge Ethereum community, crypto community more general, developer community, just the sheer number of people using ETH, using all kinds of cryptocurrencies to save money, which is actually a really big need for them because of the currency situation in the country, and even people just accepting it for payments, right? Like, I just randomly walked into a coffee shop, and it just happens. The guy just happens to, know a lot of things about cryptocurrency. He happens to have a Binance wallet, and I asked, hey, can we pay with ETH? And he said, sure. So huge amounts of adoption, but there's a catch. And the catch is that even though there's a huge amount of crypto adoption, a lot of it is actually Binance wallet adoption, right? So basically, lots of people who are using, both Ethereum and other crypto things, they're actually using it through a centralized intermediary. Now, why are they doing this, right? So centralized exchanges are cheap, meaning if you want to just, send someone money inside one of these, a centralized system, you have zero fees. It's convenient. In particular, payments are instant. Binance to Binance transfers instant. When I paid out of an Ethereum wallet, the transaction took, I think, something like 2 to 5 minutes to confirm. And now this is actually something where we have made some improvements, right? So who here has used Ethereum before 2020? Who here has used Ethereum in the last 6 months? Who here possibly has noticed how it has become somehow much easier to get transactions reliably confirmed quickly. This has happened because of 2 protocol changes. One of them is something called EIP 1559, which is this very kind of weird economic technocratic thing that has a lot of interesting math behind it. But the basic thing that it does is it changes the fee market so that instead of requiring a fixed amount of transactions in every block, the blocks are allowed to be like bigger and smaller and kind of adjust to very short-term changes in demand, right? And instead of keeping a constant block size, the protocol keeps a kind of constant transaction fee, or what's called the base fee within a block, and that adjusts over time, right? So because of this, instead of a transaction taking some random amount of time, that's often minutes, a transaction can be included in about 1 or 2 blocks. And then what the merge did is, as a weird byproduct of statistics and the difference between Poisson distributions and getting a block every 12 seconds, it turns out that the average amount of time you have to wait until your transaction gets included into a block is divided by 2. It's only half as much. So if everyone here is in math, proof assignment, prove it. Due date 72 hours from now, go. But the point, so like Ethereum has made a lot of strides on this question already, actually. But when I was in Argentina at the time, the merge had not yet happened. EIP 1559 had happened, but the wallet I was using did not yet support it. And now that wallet actually does support it, right? So centralized exchanges are cheap, convenient, protect the user from mistakes. If you screw up, you can go to talk to their customer service, maybe KYC again, and you'll get your money back. With Ethereum wallets, that's something that, at least with the status quo, you're not really able to do. You have your 12-word seed phrase, and if you lose your 12-word seed phrase, you're screwed. If someone else takes a photo of your 12-word seed phrase, congrats, they have all your money, right? So centralized exchanges don't really have these issues. Now, there's a darker side to centralized exchanges, right? Who here recognizes some of the people in this photo? Yes. Right. So centralized exchanges are, also sometimes, not very trustworthy. They, do stuff. And sometimes they decide that they're better at having fun with your money than you are. Okay. So basically, this is a space that is all about decentralization. What is decentralization? We are building systems where you cannot be rug pulled, right? Now, there's many kinds of being rug pulled. There is, having all of your money stolen from you. There is being locked out of a PayPal account and them holding your money for 180 days with no recourse. There is being locked out of a social media platform with no recourse. There's all kinds of rug pulling that happens, right? And in a decentralized system, you're supposed to have programmatic rules that are transparent, that kind of describe the processes under which things happen in whatever application you're participating in, right? And it's a nice dream, and it's a good, and it's good to try to put more control and power back in the hands of users and communities as opposed to these far away centralized actors. But there are challenges, right? So I think some of these challenges are kind of the fundamental philosophical challenges, but some of these challenges I think people don't appreciate the extent to which they are technical problems that can be technically solved. They just haven't been properly technically solved yet, right? So one is scalability and fees, right? So when I paid at that coffee shop in Buenos Aires, the transaction fee was like something around $3 or $4, right? If it was a Binance to Binance transfer, it would be $0. Now, back in 2013, I remember there was this movement that was really trying hard to get people to accept Bitcoin as a consumer merchant payment mechanism, just for people to pay in restaurants, pay in coffee shops. In Berlin, there was even this district, Kreuzberg, where people made this movement to convince a huge amount of restaurants in one region to start accepting Bitcoin. This was called the Bitcoin Keys. I actually went to a couple of these places back in the day. There was a burger place. There was this nice vegan restaurant. There were a couple of other ones. And there was this really lovely movement. But then that died down over time. Why did it die down? Basically, it's just transaction fees, right? Back in 2013, the main pitch for why you're supposed to accept Bitcoin instead of accepting credit cards is like, well, credit cards charge like 2.9% on every transaction, right? Actually, PayPal charges 2.9% on every transaction. For international payments, PayPal actually charges 2.9% plus 3.9% plus more on foreign exchange fees. It might have changed since then. I actually don't know, right? But this was like the pitch back then, and it was true back then. And the problem is that, like, well, the whole fees being low thing basically stops being true, right? So that's a deal breaker, right? Like, lots of applications that are totally fine and that make a huge amount of sense if the transaction fee is negligible stop being true if the transaction fee is $8.43. Who here is interested in using alternatives to Twitters? Who here would be interested in using alternatives to Twitter if registering your account on that alternative cost $8.43? $69.12. $384.41. Okay. So, we got some true believers, which is good, right? But, the point is that, like, these are kind of a boring topic, but they are a killer of things that otherwise would be extremely promising. And I think the corollary of that, which is really powerful, is that people should not assume a category of applications has failed just because it has failed in an environment where setting anything up costs $8.31. Problem number 3, privacy. Who here just loves the idea of broadcasting to all their friends and future friends and family and the government and every company what exactly who they're making what kinds of payments to? Okay, we got some true believers, which is good. But, privacy is valuable, right? So the other challenge is kind of making all of these happen while keeping Ethereum recognizably Ethereum, right? So what I mean by this is that there's lots of different groups in Ethereum that are building lots of different stuff. And that's good. That's beautiful. We have an open ecosystem. It's, we have lots of groups operating independently, and it's possible for new people to come in and start building independently without asking for permission, without, you don't have to apply for an API key. But one of the challenges is that there's, there is the possibility that like things end up branching off into totally separate systems that don't really kind of intersect with each other and that look very different and that have very different properties from what already exists, right? So good scaling is being able to do what you do now, but paying 10 or 100 times lower transaction fees. Bad scaling is when, you have some totally new thing and people tell you, ta-da, this is Ethereum, this scales, but it just looks like a totally different thing. And if your friends turn out to have used a different way of scaling Ethereum, you're not compatible with him, and there's no way to like move between these things, and it's like not clear what the properties of these things are, and it just turns into a mess of confusion, right? So there's also a challenge here, which is like more like a coordination challenge, right? Which is that like actually, making sure that all of these different pieces, the scalability pieces, the account security pieces, the privacy pieces, actually work together with each other, right? And this is difficult, right? But this is something that I think we can start moving towards. So one concrete example. Who here wants to build a wallet? Wallets are fun, So in the previous decade of Ethereum, it was enough for a wallet to just support sending people ETH, showing your QR code so other people could send you ETH, and, possibly, logging into a mini web browser so you could go access some dApps, right? In the future, this is not going to be enough for a wallet, right? A wallet that actually makes sense in a post-scalability world is a wallet that needs to support the Ethereum Layer 1 and also at least all of the major Layer 2 protocols that are being built on top of Ethereum. Cross Layer 2 transfers need to be built in. If I have all of my money on Optimism and you have an account that's, or you want your money on Arbitrum, then like I should be able to click send, and that should automatically route my money through some kind of, cross layer 2 exchange protocol so that it gets to you. Right? And like this is something that should happen automatically. This is something that like you should not have to go and, personally fumble yourself and like figure out what hop.exchange is and how to use it. It should all be, behavior that just happens as part of the send button. A way for recipients to express how he wants to get paid. This is another thing, right? It's looking like addresses are not going to be enough, right? An address, just 20 bytes, but your address where, right? Like, do you want to be paid on Optimism? Do you want to be paid on Polygon? Or maybe you're happy being paid on, zk-sig and Kakarot and Polygon, but someone else has coins on Kakarot and Scroll and Arbitrum. And, it turns out that Polygon is the intersection, and then you just make a direct transfer there, right? Like, this is the sort of stuff that you just need to do, right? And this is the sort of stuff that, like, TradFi does under the a lot under the hood, right? Like, who here has used a credit card internationally, right? Like, there's a lot of these, like, under the hood cross-exchange protocols going on. And, realistically, cross-layer 2 Ethereum has to do the same sort of stuff, right? Now, the nice thing about this kind of project is that you don't have to invent your own cryptography to do it, right? You don't have to like build your own big thing from scratch. All you have to do is just like hook together a couple of protocols that already exist, right? You just have to, hook together existing tools for accessing Optimism, existing tools for accessing, a zk-sig, and you want to, hook in Hop protocol, possibly a couple of other routing protocols, have the possibility of adding more routing protocols in the future, and have a send button that kind of puts a bunch of actually routes things correctly. Possibly create your own format for how to provide the information of where you want to get paid, and then if people like it, then you go and that 2 months later you might end up making your own ERC. So it's like actually I think within range for a hackathon team, but like this type of stuff is the sort of thing that I think we need more of. Another wallet challenge, social recovery and multisig. So if you just go to my blog, vitalik.ca, and if you just like Control F for social recovery, you can find like this incredibly long post I wrote on the topic. But basically the kind of summary of this idea is that existing ways of doing wallets are just incredibly insecure, right? So, most wallets are what's called EOAs, externally owned accounts. They're accounts that are controlled by a private key, right? The reason they're called externally owned is because other types of accounts are controlled by a piece of code, which is part of Ethereum, right? So the problem with EOAs is they're controlled by a single key. And if you lose that key, you're screwed. If someone else steals that key, you're screwed. If you make multiple backups of your key to reduce the chance that you're going to lose the key, that increases the chance that someone's going to steal you, right? So, it's actually not a very good design for a huge number of people, right? I mean, honestly, it's not even sufficient for me, right? Like, I keep my money in, multisigs. So what is a multisig? It's a wallet where there's multiple keys, and you need some portion of the keys to move the money. Social recovery is a kind of a closely related concept. Basically, you have a wallet that has one key, but there is a set of backup keys that are going to be owned by other people, and that set of backup keys has the ability to change the main key if you lose it, right? So social recovery protects only for loss, not against theft. Multisig protects against loss and theft. The advantage of social recovery is just because you only need one key to sign transactions. Normally, it's easier, right? So social recovery is good for like a hot wallet, and multisig is good for like a cold wallet, right? Like multisig is great for, like storing your life savings, for example, but you don't want to store your life savings in something where the stuff that's needed to just drain all of your money away sits on one device, right? So making a wallet that's like actually good at supporting this. And then privacy. So privacy is also an important challenge, and don't want to get into this in detail, but there's a lot of like really fascinating privacy technology that's really worth worrying. So identity, right? So ENS on layer 2 was happening, right? So ENS, we're here house a dot name. Yay. So it's like, a big part of the emerging Ethereum identity layer, right? If you want to have a name and you want that name to be decentralized and to like really be controlled by you and not sort of be dependent on some other entity, then, ENS, decentralized system on top of Ethereum, it is the way to do it. Now, one of the problems with ENS is that it's expensive, right? Now, there is the registration fee, there is the $8 a month, and that's about as large as, regular DNS fees. But there's also transaction fees, right? So the last time I did some an operation to do something with my ENS, I think the last thing I did was when I published a new blog post, and because my blog is geared to IPFS, I use it. I need to actually update the IPFS record inside of the contract on ENS, which contains the IPFS hash, and that's a transaction. And I think that cost me about $8, right? So now, what if transaction fees go up by a factor of 10 to what they were last year or 2 years ago, right? Then that transaction fee of $8 is going to be a transaction fee of $80, right? So ENS on layer 1 is expensive. It may get more expensive. ENS on layer 2 is the solution, right? We're doing layer 2s. Layer 2s are scaling, but we want Ethereum to we want applications that people actually use to actually benefit from the scaling, right? And there's lots of hidden assumptions throughout the Ethereum ecosystem that kind of assume that you're on layer 1. And if we want people to actually benefit from layer 2 scaling, then we kind of really need to start breaking down those assumptions, and we need to start looking at the important applications and basically seeing, how do we make them layer 2 friendly? So this is a screenshot from something called opcnames.xyz, and this is built on a protocol called CCIP. What this does is basically you have a smart contract on layer 1 which owns the domain ecc.eth. And then that contract has logic that is based on the CCIP protocol that basically says if you have a subdomain of ecc.eth and you're looking for that subdomain, then you can go to this other place and you can basically check what that subdomain actually is on the Optimism network, right? So instead of doing everything on the layer 1, subdomains of ecc.eth all get managed, updated, created, destroyed on Optimism. And so if you were to have your domain.ecc.eth, updating any records only requires being on Optimism. It does not require any layer 1 transaction. And so from a gas fee perspective, everything is vastly cheaper. Now, this is the Optimism one. I have asked a couple of other layer 2s if they have equivalents, and a couple of weeks ago, the answer from the one or two that I asked was not yet, but I imagine they will very soon, and very possible some others already do, which is great, right? But this is one example, I think, of something that is good and that we